This is Texas Rangers announcer Eric Nadel, and you're listening to the Ranger Report podcast, as you should be.
This is the Ranger Report podcast. News, insights, predictions, interviews, and information about the Texas Rangers from the major leagues to the minor leagues. And now, here are your hosts, Ben Dieter and CJ Berryman.
Experience the joy of watching your friends and family's faces light up when you feed them wild game you harvested and made into delicious sausages, or meat you barbecue and grill with the finest seasonings available. Visit our friends at Waltons.com to find everything you need to turn wild game into tasty meat snacks or spice up your barbecue with new flavors and seasonings. With over 500 seasonings to choose from, there's something that everyone will love. They even have step-by-step videos and how-to articles at Meatgistics to help you go from animal to edible. Use coupon Rangers15 at checkout to save 15% on your first order at Waltons.com. Waltons, everything but the meat.
Welcome to the Ranger Report podcast, everybody. We are excited today to be joined by Matt Hicks from the Rangers Radio Network. Matt, how are you today?
I'm great, and thanks for having me on. I appreciate the opportunity.
Yes, the honor is all here, sir. The honor is all here.
So we were just talking about before you came on, that we've now had you, Eric, and Jared Sandler. So we pretty much got the whole radio booth on the show now.
That's good, and I'm fine with sliding in third there. Those two guys are great. Love working with them on a daily basis during the season.
Yeah, I figured we had to get Zach Wolchuk at some point too, and then we'll round it all out.
Then Grooves.
Then Grooves, yeah.
Yeah. They're all fun. They're all great guys.
They are. All right. Well, we wanted to start asking you, talk a little bit about you, because Ranger fans may not know. They've heard you on the radio now for almost a decade, but they may not know about how you got into what you do. So I wanted to ask you, how did you get into broadcasting, and was it always something that you kind of wanted to do?
So I guess there's a number of ways I can answer that, but maybe the best way to answer it is back in 1972, when I was 11 years old. A friend of mine and I, we were both in sixth grade, and we were living in the suburbs of Washington, D.C. And both of us were enamored with not just all sports, but with sports broadcasting. And so I said to my friend, hey, why don't we take my tape recorder and just turn down the sound on the Super Bowl and go ahead and record us doing play-by-play of the Super Bowl. And if you guys,
I can't tell you how many times I've done that, Matt. I've done the same thing.
well, I was in the sixth grade, and now realize my friend and I, we were growing up in the suburbs of D.C., and I don't recall my friend being a Washington football fan, but I was, because my dad was an usher for those football games back then. And this was before they hired George Allen and they got really, really good. And so the attendance wasn't always the greatest. But anyway, my friend and I thought, let's do some play-by-play and see what happens. And so my dad was gracious enough to let us sit in our living room. We got the copy of the Washington Post and the rosters for Super Bowl VI, which was the Dallas Cowboys and the Miami Dolphins. And neither one of us had any kind of affinity for either of those teams. But, we studied the rosters and we split it up. I did 2 quarters. He did 2 quarters. And I still have that cassette tape. I still have those 2 cassette tapes, but I haven't translated them into something where I can listen to them. I'm probably going to get that done here sooner rather than later, although I've had it for the longest time. But I knew back then that it was something that I wanted to do. And so there wasn't really an avenue for that either in junior high school or high school, although in high school I did morning and afternoon announcements. And so I was involved in getting behind the mic there. And then it really ramped up when I went to college at the University of Maryland, because they had and still do have a student-run radio station on campus, an AM and an FM station. While I was there in the late 70s and early 80s, the station got its FM license. And so I had to get an FCC license to go on the air. We did sports broadcasting on both AM and FM. And I did a variety of sports, and I eventually became the sports director. Quick side note, when I was the sports director, one of the individuals that I brought on to be on our sportscasting team was a guy from Bucks County, Pennsylvania, who would later go on to do work in minor league baseball, but then eventually made it to the state of Texas and did a lot of work on TV for the San Antonio Spurs. And he's now the voice of Texas A&M football and basketball, Andrew Monaco. And so I've known him going all the way back to college. But I had the opportunity to do play-by-play of a number of sports. And then graduating from the University of Maryland, I got a job right out of college in small market radio in Cambridge, Maryland. You guys probably have never heard of that. It's an eastern shore town on the Choptank River.
We're still trying to figure out where all the Texas cities are. It's so huge. So
yeah, well, that takes forever. 254 counties, right?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So I got my first job in radio right out of college in Cambridge. That was a station that was on the University of Maryland network. And at the time, Maryland's football coach was Bobby Ross. And I don't know if you know him, but he
yes, sir.
A number of teams in college and also coached in the NFL. Bobby was gracious enough to, because I had done a show with him when I was in college, he was gracious enough to allow me to do a show exclusively with him on our radio station in Cambridge. But I had the opportunity to do both news and sports broadcasting there at that small mom and pop AM FM station. And then I had a number of other jobs before I got into baseball. In 1989, I got hired by a radio station in Frederick, Maryland, which is about an hour west of Baltimore, to do their new ball club. They had just gotten a minor league team, the Frederick Keys, who had moved from Hagerstown, Maryland, and the radio station was hiring the play-by-play announcer. And so I put my 2 cents in. I got hired, worked for the radio station to do those games. I eventually parlayed that into a full-time job at that radio station. And the guy that was responsible for outreach from Mount St. Mary's College in Emmitsburg, Maryland, had heard me do baseball play-by-play. He wanted the Mount St. Mary's men's team to have full every game coverage on a network. And so he worked with us to get that set up. And so for a while there, I was doing baseball for 5 months. And then for another 4 or 5 months, I was doing men's basketball and eventually women's basketball at Mount St. Mary's. And if you don't know about Mount St. Mary, that's where Jim Phelan was the longtime head coach. They were a Division II power. They had just gone Division I the year before I joined them in 89-90. So I got an opportunity to do quite a bit of play-by-play there when I was in Frederick. And then from Frederick, my next job in baseball was moving to El Paso, Texas, to work for the then Diablos, who were an affiliate of the Milwaukee Brewers.
The El Paso Diablos.
Yep, and I got hired by them, and so
now they're the Chihuahuas.
Yeah. So back then we were AA, an affiliate of Milwaukee. I got hired by Jen and Karen Paul to do their play-by-play, and so that was the first time I worked for a baseball team. Actually, the guy I replaced was Matt Vasgersian, who is now on the MLB Network, of course, and he does a lot of work for them, and he's their main play-by-play voice. He also now is one of the play-by-play voices of the Angels. But I replaced Matty V back in 1995, would have been my first season in El Paso. And then from El Paso, I went to Corpus Christi for that startup team in 2005, the AA affiliate of the Houston Astros, working then for Ryan Sanders Baseball. And it was in Corpus Christi was where I was when the Rangers called me back in 2012. So that's a quick overview of how I got in, going from 6th grade until now.
Yeah, you summed it up pretty well. And so obviously you did some high school football and also some hockey. Yep. So other than baseball, what was or is your favorite sport to call?
Yeah, so I don't know if I can put the favorite title on it. When you're working and when you've got the headset strapped on and you're getting paid to do it, those are my favorite, whatever I'm doing. But I'll say this, that the easiest for me is basketball. I think the easiest would be basketball.
Matt, basketball was it's always been my most difficult, man.
Really? Well, the reason that I think that it's the easiest for me is that it's not as fast as hockey. When you're doing ice hockey, you have to edit as you go along, and to me, that's a skill that requires experience. And the more experience you have, the better at it you get, because you can't possibly describe everything that's happening on the ice. But you can come pretty close to describing what's happening just about everything on the basketball court. You might have to edit a little bit, but you never really have any downtime. And I was really fortunate. Yes, I've done a ton of high school basketball and football. I've even done not necessarily high school baseball, but American Legion baseball. I've done Little League baseball. And those can be some very challenging things because you really don't have, you have to do all the prep work. And it's not like Major League Baseball where you have so much of the work that is already prepared for you. But for me, doing college basketball was probably the easiest for me. And I had a great deal of fun those 6 years that I was at Mount St. Mary's. All 6 years I did the men. For 3 of the 6 years I did the women. And just going to the practices, preparing for those games, and broadcasting those games. I had a terrific broadcast partner during my time there, a gentleman by the name of Roy Sigler, who had been a head coach at Boston University for their basketball program. And when he left, Rick Pitino took over.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Yeah, Roy was made for basketball analysis work. He was so good at it, and we developed such a good chemistry of me, him making a point about a play or why that offensive play worked or why it didn't work, what sort of defense Mount was getting into. He was able to condense and distill his thought into the type of time frame that allowed me to pick up the play-by-play when it was important. So I didn't necessarily have to talk about the guy bringing the ball up the court on the dribble, what it was he was looking to do. When the play got serious, Roy got quiet. I was able to describe the play. When it was done, he was able to, and he always had this sense of enthusiasm about him, so that the broadcast just always seemed to be getting better and better. And so I really cherish the 6 years that I had the opportunity to work with Roy and Coach Phelan and all the good folks back in Emmitsburg. So to me, that was a great deal of fun. But I can say this, I've never had the opportunity to do NBA basketball, but I have had the opportunity when I was much younger to go courtside at the then Washington Bullets games and do some play-by-play courtside. And there is quite a bit of difference between Division I basketball and the NBA in terms of speed. And so I think when you're doing the NBA, kudos to all of those guys, because the game is so much faster that they do have to edit as they go along. But yeah, for me, basketball is the easiest. Baseball has always been a challenge because of all the dead time. Football, I really enjoy doing, especially if you have somebody that's good to work with, because if you memorize all of the skill position players' numbers and whatever you can do to memorize, then calling football play-by-play, I think, is very enjoyable. But I've always found baseball to be the most challenging.
Yeah, and you, unfortunately, this past year, you had to go through 102 losses. So there's a lot of dead air there. And Eric Nadel, when he got on with us about a month ago, he said he learned diversionary tactics. And that's where you and Jared Sandler come in to kind of, continue to appease the audience, I guess, and keep people listening. So, I mean, those have to be difficult games. So talk about that a little bit. Those, when the game is going great, I mean, you can sit there and you can brag on the team and brag on somebody so-and-so and how well they're doing or how well they're pitching or whatever. But when the game is going badly and about the fifth or sixth inning that things are not going well, y'all have a great dynamic. So just kind of talk about how that dynamic works.
Yeah, I think that all emanates from Eric, because he's been doing it for such a long time. And he's had the opportunity to call some great Ranger seasons and some really bad Ranger seasons and a lot of seasons that are in between. So you can't replace that experience for knowing where to take the listener based upon what's happening in the game. And you're right, TJ. You're in the 5th or 6th inning and you're down 10-1. You really can't concentrate so much on the game and on the pitch by pitch. But when a new pitcher comes in, or when somebody is coming in off the bench as a position player, and you can talk a little bit about their story, then those diversionary tactics are you giving the listeners some interesting information about the people that are coming into the game, or about what a pitcher who may not have done well, what it is that the club is looking for from him, what he needs to improve on, where he needs to go. You might even tell stories about, if you know stuff about these guys' families, or some interesting tidbits about them coming up in baseball. That's when you're able to use that sort of stuff. And then, there's other things going on in the world of baseball. So you might take some time to talk about some of the other pennant races, or the upcoming opponent, or, how the Rangers pitching rotation is going to be altered. There's so many different things that you can discuss. And then, sometimes the diversionary tactics just go completely away from baseball and into something that might be historic for that particular day, or you might get off on a tangent that's not baseball, or Jared might start commenting about my dad's shoes and go off on that tangent where he starts talking about how I dress. And then it used to be that I would start making fun of where he went to college, but I can't do that. He goes to the same school.
He's
now.
a USC Trojan. We can make fun of him on this podcast, Matty.
I think the big thing, when you're talking about broadcasting games, that the game itself doesn't hold interest. Eric, every day, and I really admire how he goes about preparing for a game every day. Eric, on a daily basis, comes to work and says to himself, what about this game is interesting to me? But more than that, what about this game would be interesting to the listener? What about the people that are playing in the game tonight would be interesting to the listener? So let me find those things and let me line them up. What is going to be interesting to the listener today? If the game takes over, and if we've got a 4-3 game going into the 8th inning, then all of that preparation for the diversionary tactics goes by the wayside. And you don't know how much work Eric put in, or I put in, or Jared put in, the stuff that never gets on the air, and the game ends up being great. And it's beautiful because that's what we want. But on those occasions when it's not like that, then that's, I think, where Eric has really been able to shine through over the years, because in his mind, he puts the listener first. And then by keeping the listener in mind, that guides his preparation. And so watching him do that throughout the years has sort of helped me to better prepare for each broadcast. And Jared's unique because he grew up as a kid listening to Eric. And so he's got that perspective. And then watching him work as well, he too has picked up a lot of that. And so I think that helps, because now we're all on the same page, or at least we're trying to be on the same page as Eric on a nightly basis.
Yeah. And Eric, one thing he told us that was most interesting is that they don't pay y'all to do the games. They pay you to do the preparation. That's
true. There's no question about that, because a lot of people wonder, well, you guys got great jobs. You work from 7 to 10 or 10:30, and 3.5 hours of work.
That ain't how that happens. I can totally debunk that personally.
Exactly. Because we'll get to work for a 7:00 game, for a home game, usually by around 3, and then spend most of that time between 3 and about 6:30 preparing for the game. If schedules are normal, then we'll take a little bit of a break before the game starts to eat while the pregame show is on. We tape the pregame show in advance.
Y'all don't eat in the booth? Come on now. Get you a dollar dog on Wednesdays, man.
So Sometimes we'll eat in the booth, and here in the last 2 years because of COVID, we've been eating in the booth almost exclusively, if we eat at all. Now, Eric and Jared are a little different than me. They're pretty good about eating right before the game. I'm not so good about that because it bothers me from a physical standpoint in my throat. So a lot of times I won't eat at all before a game. I might eat right before I come to work, sort of a late lunch kind of thing. But going over to the new ballpark, I can't think. There's not been one time that I have eaten in the media kitchen or in the media dining room. I haven't done it once. It used to be that we would eat, 2019 and prior, we would eat in the media dining room and talk with other people and exchange information and whatnot. But for the last 2 seasons, that hasn't happened. But anyway, our preparation doesn't start when we get to the ballpark at 3:00. I think for all of us, when we get up in the morning, the Rangers do this really nice thing for us. They gather a series of clips of all of the articles that have been written about the ball club for that day. And so we have an opportunity to get up in the morning and read that and then do our own prep. And sometimes, I'll start my prep for the next day immediately after the game at the ballpark, where, I've got my laptop and I can go online and I can update some of my dailies and get that done while it's fresh on my mind immediately after the game. And then the next day, read those clips, do other reading before I have lunch at home or go out to lunch, and then get to the ballpark and then start that cycle all over again. And then it's the same on the road. If we're on the road someplace for a 7:00 game, when we get to the ballpark is often dictated by the bus schedules. But because of COVID, instead of having 2 buses going to a ballpark, sometimes we've had 4 or 5 so that there'll be fewer people on the bus. So that makes it easier to get to the ballpark when you want to. But in general, we try to get there 3.5 to 4 hours before game time.
Yeah. And, a lot of people, probably think that you guys just wing that stuff, but that would be almost impossible during a game like that to just wing that kind of stuff. Cause I'm telling you, and I honestly, I listen to you guys a lot because I'm usually out and about, or, when I get home, it's just enjoyable to listen to it. Plus, it's hard to find Valley Sports Southwest these days. But anyway, listening to you guys on the radio is just fun. And you guys do such a great job. And again, all the prep that goes into that shows, because it's, even when they're down 10-1, it's still entertaining to listen to you guys on the radio.
Thank you. And again, I think Eric deserves a lot of the credit for that and the way he prepares. When you think about it, he got the Ford Frick Award back in 2014, and he just decided to show up and just, lace them up and bring out the scorebook at 6:45 and start writing stuff in. That'd be okay. But he doesn't do that, and he hasn't done that. He continues to prepare on a daily basis like he always has. And so when the chief is doing that, you've got to fall in line. And but even saying it that way, it's just such a pleasure to work with him. I think that we're friends away from the broadcast as well, and we have a lot of other common interests. I think Eric is so musically inclined, and goes to so many concerts. I'm not quite the concert goer that he is. But we can talk about music. We can talk about other sports. We can talk about other things that are going on in the world. And so there's never a time when we're at work, if we're not preparing, that we don't have a conversation about something that's going on in the world at that time.
So you mentioned Nadel. Yeah, he's a big music guy, and he actually, when he was on with us, turned me on to a Texas blues artist that's out of the DFW, and that is Abraham Alexander. And we are actually going to have him on the podcast tomorrow. Okay. So what do you think about Abraham and what he brings to the table?
See, and when it comes to artists like that, I just don't know these artists like Eric does. And it's amazing.
Oh, he's got a Rolodex of just, it's crazy.
It's amazing how many people he knows, not just in the sports industry, but how many people he knows in the music industry. It's amazing. When we go on the road, before COVID, we would have a constant stream of people that would come and be visitors in our booth, and most of them are from the music world. people who are musicians, people who are authors. It's funny. We kind of joke a little bit. There's so many people that Eric still knows from his time in elementary school in Brooklyn who have gone on to accomplish great things. One of my favorite stories about Eric and the people he knows was a time that we were eating in the media dining room at Fenway Park, and it was one of those deals we had both finished. There were a couple of other people at the table with us, but they had to get to work, so they got up and left. And there was that awkward moment, a very rare awkward moment, when Eric and I are sitting there. We talked about everything we want to talk about for the game, and there's this silence of about 5 or 10 seconds. And right in the middle of the table, as is the case with all the tables, there are an assortment of condiments. And Eric reaches for this mustard jar, and he holds up this mustard jar. It's Gold's mustard. And he looks at it and he says to me, the guy that started this Gold's mustard business, I went to elementary school. And I'm like, are you kidding me? There's a condiment sitting on the table, and he went to school with the guy that started this.
Does he know who made salt and pepper? Apparently.
I'm like, Eric, is there anybody that you don't know? It's truly amazing how many people he knows. And that is one of the many great things about Eric Nadel, is how he has maintained contact with so many people throughout the years. And so it's not surprising to me when he says, oh, this particular musician who maybe I haven't heard of because they're not a popular musician, or they're not a musician for me, or from the 80s and 90s, artists that I would listen to that are more popular. He knows these people. They're actual friends of his. And so it's fun to be able to, on occasion, go to concerts with him and see some of these artists I've never even heard of before. I've never heard their music, and have an opportunity to enjoy that kind of music. And so with Abraham, I don't know him. I don't know his music, but I would certainly, because Eric turned you on to him, I would certainly be interested in listening to his stuff.
Well, I'm going to sing with him tomorrow.
Uh-oh.
There you go.
I'm going to sing with him. I can sing. And so me and Abraham have already agreed, and we're going to do a duet to one of his songs. Yeah.
That'll be cool. All right. Well, before we wrap it up, I always like to ask this when we have guests on. What is a hobby or something you like to do outside of baseball that Rangers fans don't really know about?
Ooh.
I mean, most players say golf. So
well, yeah, and I'm not gonna default to that because I am not a golfer. But here recently, my wife and I have been going quite frequently to Top Golf. And we've gone to a number of Top Golf locations, not just in the Metroplex, but elsewhere. And we try to do it at least once or twice a month. So that's something that we've sort of gotten into here, and that's just been in the last year or so. But I would say that for me, something that I've done throughout my life is play chess. And I think probably some of our listeners know about that. I used to, when I kept up my USCF membership, I used to play in tournaments. That was prior to joining the Rangers in Major League Baseball, when I had a little more time in the off season to do that sort of thing. The most recent tournaments that I played in when I was working for Corpus Christi. So I think the last actual tournament that I played in would have been sometime in 2011 or 2012. But I kind of try to keep up with the chess world. And for a while, when my son was in elementary school, I was a coach at his elementary school. So anytime anybody wants to talk chess or play chess, I get into it. I played chess with some of the guys.
I'll be your Huckleberry.
What's that?
I said, I'll be your Huckleberry. I was in the chess club until I was 16.
Okay. Yeah. And when I was in junior high, chess was huge in the United States because Bobby Fischer just defeated Boris Spassky for the 1972 world title. And the years when I was in junior high was 73, 74, 75. And so all junior highs and high schools basically had chess teams pop up then. And we had a really good one. In my final year in junior high, we went unbeaten. I went to the county tournament. I almost represented the county in a national tournament. I was one position shy of doing that. And then by the time I got to high school, it kind of fizzled out. And so we didn't have a chess club in high school, but so many people got into it with the advent of Bobby Fischer. And I think here in recent years, there's been a lot of kids across the country that have gotten into it. I follow what goes on at the top level of chess. Magnus Carlsen here not too long ago defended his title as world champion. I think it's the 5th time he's defended his title. So I kind of follow what's going on there, but I wouldn't necessarily call it a hobby. But then, my wife and I are both big hockey fans, so we're both Stars fans. We follow the Stars. My wife is from Buffalo, so she's a big Sabres fan.
Boo.
And she's also a big Bills fan. So with the Bills, we're going to do the whole Buffalo thing for the game against the Patriots. It's the Patriots that they're playing, right? I think.
Yep.
I believe so.
And so
Cowboys are playing the 49ers too, so it's like it's like the early 90s all over again.
Yeah, exactly. So, but we're going to do the whole Buffalo thing. We're going to get chicken wings. We're going to get beef on weck, and we're going to try to root the Bills on to victory this weekend.
All right. So, last question. This one's the hardest one. You are on the hot seat, Matt. What is your go-to at Whataburger?
All right. So for Whataburger, I concentrate on breakfast. And so my go-to at Whataburger would be a breakfast on a bun with sausage. That would be my Whataburger go-to.
That is delicious.
Yep.
Yeah, we a lot of players that we've talked to, we asked that question. Most of them say the honey butter chicken biscuit is their go-to for breakfast.
I can tell you that my son's go-to is I might not know the name of it, but it's the barbecue chicken strip sandwich.
Chicken strip sandwich. Yep.
And so when he came back for the holidays from USC, the first thing he wanted to do was to go to Whataburger and get that sandwich. So I took him.
Smart boy.
Yeah, he knows his roots.
Well, Matt Hicks, we really appreciate your time tonight.
Guys, thank you very much. I enjoyed talking to you.
Thanks for listening to the Ranger Report podcast. Find us on Twitter, Facebook, and at therangerreport.com.